Hello. It's a pleasure to be here with a very controversial topic, maybe, for some of you. We're going to start by a raise of hand to get a sense of, where do you stand regarding discovery. So, there's 4 proposals. I'm going to ask you to think about which one is closest to you, okay? So, is discovery part of every project for you? Is it something you do, every now and then? Is it a concept that you understand but you don't practice? Or is it just the name of a TV channel or a car? No judgment. So, if you're closest to answer A, please raise your hand. Okay, so that's roughly 1/5, 1/4 of the room. Answer B, please raise your hand. Okay, a bit more. Answer C, raise your hand. Okay, less so. And answer D, raise your hand. Thank you. So we have 12 honest people in this room. Thank you for that. So just to get a sense of what you can expect from this intervention, if you're in the A category, hopefully you'll get some advice on how to make discovery more efficient. If you're in B and C, maybe I'm going to change your perspective of what discovery is about. And if you're in group D, you're going to get value immediately because I'm going to give you a new definition of what discovery is. So I'm just going to make it very simple. I'm looking at you, sir. So if the delivery phase is where you build and ship something to users, well, the discovery phase is what happens before when you're trying to define and design what needs to be built and shipped, right? Delivery, you ship something and you build it before that. The discovery part is where you figure out what you have to build. Make sense? So if you were answer B, and that's the only reason why you came was to understand what this discovery word was, you can actually leave the room. For the rest, we're going to continue a bit. So I worked for 7 years as a head of UX at PayPal, and my focus was on trying to understand why PayPal, payment solution, was very successful in some countries and not getting a lot of traction in others. So my obsession was to understand what were the local specificities, for example, in markets like Scandinavia, like Russia, like Turkey, Italy, Dubai, etc. So to be fair, we did not make a major difference in Scandinavia. So I think PayPal is not very successful here. Apologies for that. However, there's other markets where we went through in-depth design thinking approach. And with this, we really got to understand in the concept of payment, you actually discover how much payment is really deeply ingrained in the culture of each country. So you learn a lot about that, and then you were able to bring some solution to that. And design thinking was how we were operating. Then I left, and I joined a company, BlaBlaCar, which was the first unicorn in France. And for those who don't know, BlaBlaCar is a carpooling service. So for example, if I would go from Oslo to another big city in Norway, I could be the one driving. And if maybe it's going to be an expensive trip for me, so I'm going to share the cost with people that don't have a car or would like, to hop on with me. Okay, so we're going to share the cost. It's going to be cheaper for me as a driver because some of the fuel cost is going to be paid by the passengers, and for passengers it might be a cheaper option. It's an application that is today available in 22 countries. And what was very specific about this experience was that it was going through hyper-growth. So, going very, very fast in terms of, adoption and geographical expansion. And in that process, I was at the time Chief Product Officer. What I discovered was that design thinking, the way we were doing it at PayPal, was not working for us. Like, we really tried to apply the same approach, but it was just failing us all the time. And so we had to, come up with something that was better. The feeling we had was the fundamentals are here, but it's just not efficient enough. So what we came up with was a radical process that we really implemented fully at BlaBlaCar, where we define 7 systematic checkpoints. Every single project will go through those checkpoints to determine what type of discovery would be necessary and where we should put our efforts. And so we deployed this approach to all the different product and design teams. So there were 15 at the time, and we saw amazing results in terms of quality, in terms of speed, in terms of even autonomy of the teams. The BlaBlaCar culture is highly related to sharing. One of the internal values is share more, learn more. So the concept is the more you actually share your knowledge, the more knowledge you're going to gain by, by others who actually share back with you. So we decided with Tristan Charvilla, who we have been working with at PayPal and at BlaBlaCar, to write a book about it. The book is called Discovery Discipline, describing how we were operating. Describing this way of going through a discovery process in a very disciplined manner. Something surprising happened at that moment because we wrote the book, we published it, and then we moved on to other things. The thing is, this book got some interesting echo in a lot of French company because at the time we had published the book in French. And the logos you see here are companies of totally different sizes. Some of them are the biggest French banks, some of them are major retailers, some of them are smaller startups. And we got thinking like, what is it about this method that actually is getting so much attention? There must be something about it that we thought was special about BlaBlaCar and seems to have a wider echo. And the common denominator when we actually did some user interviews about those people that adopted this method very, very rapidly, sometimes at companies that were way bigger than what we had experimented ourselves, the word of waste came back all the time. The reason why they started to be interested in something else, it turns out that something else was what we proposed, but the trigger point was they were looking for something that would reduce the sense of waste that was happening every single time a team in their company was going through a discovery phase. So this waste actually comes from 7 different sources. I'm not going to go through all of them today because it would take a bit long time. So I'm just going to give an overview, and then we'll deep dive into 3 of them. Okay? I'm going to let you try to guess what are those sources of waste just through icons. I'm seeing very puzzled eyes right now. So I'm going to give you a proper description for it. So the first one is, one source of waste is that people aim for disruptive innovation. Another one is teams tend to try to cover all use cases. A third one is people believe that good products sell themselves. Sometimes we see people that define through the discovery phase the experience they actually control. We have a lot of people that try to challenge all patterns. Of course, we have teams that highly value ideas and that seek validation in the discovery process. Now, I think now you're even more puzzled because a lot of those things seem to be very positive things, right? How can those be a source of waste? Well, that's what I'm going to explain to you right now. Like, those are very good intentions, and if I didn't say they were sources of waste, this could almost be your playbook on how to, properly run a discovery process. But actually, discovery is a tricky thing, and if you do it maybe a bit too much or the wrong way, you might actually have some counter effects. And tomorrow, there will be a conference from Afonso around how to foster a product discovery culture. And I think what we're about to talk right now is what happens when you go too far in this direction. So we're going to focus on 3. For each of those, basically, we define the checkpoints that I talked about. So there's 7 checkpoints, and we're going to cover 3 of those, right? We're going to cover frame, observe, and steal. For each of those 3 topics, I'm going to go through the same structure. I'll explain where the waste is coming from. I'll pick an example of how you can do it differently, and I'll focus on the company Apple, because I think that if I would like to focus on the BlaBlaCar example, the problem is that if you're not familiar with the product, it would take too long to explain. Here, I think it's going to help you understand faster, my point. And then I'll show you what the systematic check looked like for that particular dimension. Okay? So we're going to go through this sequence 3 times. So first, why aiming for disruptive innovation is a source of waste? Well, I think there's a lot of people in the room who are going to be uncomfortable right now because I'm going to reveal something about you that maybe you don't tell anyone, maybe you're not even fully aware, but secretly, when you think about discovery and when you go into a discovery phase, your secret hope is to come up with something like this, right? So this is the Hyperloop concept, so kind of, ultra-fast train that can, go very fast because of the void inside the tunnel. But I think most of you, secretly, somehow, you're hoping that this is what you're going to come up with. The funny thing is, it is very likely that most of your companies don't need that right now. So there's a major gap between what you're hoping that you're going to discover and the value that might be necessary you bring. However, the concept of innovation might remain, very important for your company. So the subtlety that I'm going to bring in and that we apply that requires the concept of incremental innovation. Incremental innovation is just, trying to aim for something that is going to be better, but be a bit more humble about it. And if you're wondering, but how much value can you actually get from incremental innovation? Well, let's take an example at Apple. Apple launched their iPhone product in 2007. You could agree that it was disruptive innovation, right? But they did not stop there. If you're an iPhone user, the iPhone you have in your pocket is not the one from 2007. It has gone through 16 years of incremental innovation. And it's funny because if you actually ask people, in the streets, like, what is the latest innovation of Apple, it is very likely that they would think about the latest disruptive innovation that Apple came up with. As we saw earlier today, about some maybe glasses they came up with, right? That innovation systematically in our head is associated with disruptive innovation. But the truth is, if you think about impact, of course, launching the iPod was a major event for that company. But in terms of number of users, what really brought impact was the consecutive incremental innovation, 16 years, of effort. And I'm not saying disruptive innovation, is not necessary, right? But you don't need to disrupt yourself all the time. Actually, that would be a major flaw to do. And so, if you think about why, could there be waste in that perspective is, if what you're going after is disruptive innovation, well, A, you're going to realize that every single time you don't find that opportunity, it's going to create a huge amount of frustration, and you're like, oh, then everything that I found is wasted time. And actually, maybe you found interesting ideas, they're just not disruptive, just incrementally better. But you're not going to see that, so you're going to throw away a lot of good ideas. But also, if you're really after disruptive innovation all the time, then maybe that's why you're doing it only once a year. Because you kind of feel that your company doesn't need, discovery for disruptive innovation, every year, or every month, or every week. Yet at BlaBlaCar, this is what we were doing. We were doing discovery on every single project. At any given time, there were 50 different discovery phases happening in one of the 15 teams I'm describing. But they were not trying to invent a new concept. Maybe one of them was on one of their initiatives. Most of the work, the big bulk of the work, was around incremental innovation. And so how do we, check that we're clear about what we're after? We introduce something very simple. It's a very simple template that helps teams clarify at the very beginning of their discovery work what they are trying to address through their discovery effort. This template has 3 elements that are combined together define what is the project ambition they're after. They're trying to frame the project ambition. The first one, which is probably very classic to you, is the concept of success criteria. Like, imagine we're super successful at exploring this topic. What would success look like? And the only thing we're really picky about is being precise about this, trying to be as narrow as possible. Not only defining maybe a metric, but also defining by how much you're trying to move this metric up. The reason why we were picky about it is that imagine you're an e-commerce website and you want to improve the conversion of this website. Well, guess what? If the conversion of the website is 2% and you're looking for ways to improve it, it is not the same project if you're trying to move from 2% to 2.1, like a tiny improvement, versus moving from 2% to 8%, right? Both seem to be about the same idea. I want to improve conversion on my website, and this is the type of discovery I'm after. But the truth is, if you're not clear about your level of ambition, you're going to actually explore a lot of ideas that might be totally irrelevant. The second concept, what we call damage control, is interesting because both in Don's presentation or Don's lecture and in Eric's presentation, we heard the same idea. When Don was talking about the concept of externalities, like consequences, external consequences about the things we do, Eric was talking about anti-KPIs, so behaviors that our product decision may trigger, even though they're not the ones we're trying to trigger. This is actually the same concept as damage control. Taking again the example of the e-commerce website, optimizing for conversion, well, it's super easy to optimize conversion if you're willing to have the average basket price go down, right? You just throw a lot of cheap items on the e-commerce website, way more people will go through the funnel. But maybe you're not comfortable with that. Or there might be negative consequences for the users by trying to improve the conversion, and you want to get away from those. Defining this at the very beginning of your discovery process can be a lifesaver in terms of discarding so many interesting ideas that you can come up with that will not fit those two guidelines. And the last things that we try to clarify is what we call the time box, which means how much discovery effort am I willing to put into this discovery? And if you're, like most teams that don't have this level of radicality, what you probably do is, oh, you know what, I'm going to do some discovery, and I'll figure out along the way how much time I need. Like, I don't know yet. And we think this is the wrong approach. Like, discovery is about, finding the best possible solution, but the truth is you could do discovery on any topic for your entire life. So you have to time-bound how much appetite you have for this particular topic. Is it 1 month, 1 week, 1 day, maybe 1 hour? Actually, if you don't have this conversation, you're going to have people in the team that think that they're trying to, disrupt the entire company, whereas others are like, no, you need to tackle this very rapidly. So those three elements combined together bring a lot of clarity to the team that is doing the discovery work and ensures that we're going to focus on the thing that we're after and discard everything else. I'm going to pick a second source of waste. We talked this morning about the concept of having empathy for the users you're working with. What is difficult is that if you believe that by talking to users, clarity will emerge, it means you didn't talk to enough users yet. Because if you talk to one user, you'll get one point of view. If you go to 2 users, you'll have 3 ideas. If you talk to 5 users, you'll be drowning in the amount of things you're trying to address. And usually what happens is that you talk to users, you develop a lot of empathy for them and for their particular situation and for that specific use case. And then you actually don't prioritize that. I'll just give an example with a product. This is a very powerful remote control. It can do a lot of things. Actually, it's so powerful that in order for people to use it, this is what they do. For me, this is the clear example of what it means to be a team that did an amazing amount of discovery work and then didn't do their prioritization about, okay, out of all the use cases we could tackle, which one are we actually going to focus on? There's a French thinker who probably didn't look like that, by the way. This is a 3D version of what he could look like, called Montesquieu. In the totally different realm, was talking about how useless laws weaken the necessary laws, right? If actually you have a government that is constantly producing, tiny laws for every single event that just happened, well, guess what? The fundamental laws are going to be weakened by this. It's exactly the case for use cases. Taking another Apple product. So for me, the iPod is actually maybe the most important product that Apple came up with, because I think it changed the trajectory of the company. Before this product, actually Apple never really got products that were getting massive market share. They were amazing products, but actually more of a niche. This one that got out in 2001, after a couple of years, dominated the market, right? It just crushed the competitors. So let's talk about use cases and features in particular. I'll just take 3 features. One is the ability to create a playlist. So there's a couple of songs that you want to put them in a playlist. Another feature is the ability to record your voice. So if you're in the street and actually you have a device that can record MP3 files, why not have the ability to record your voice? Another use case, this is really for music fanatics that want to listen to a guitar solo like a couple of seconds in a loop. Those features, the iPod did not have them. But the crazy part is that the competitors had products on the market with those features and way more. So just think about it. Apple consciously decided to launch a product that, from a feature standpoint, seemed inferior. And they crushed the market. There's multiple explanations for that. One of them is about their ability to prioritize their use cases. So what is the use case that actually they prioritized? Well, they prioritized the one that is the most important one for an MP3 player. Browsing to select the song you want to listen to. Actually, because they discarded everything, they were able to create a beautiful experience from a sensation standpoint with this wheel that you could turn. Actually, it was so smooth that you could see at the time in the street people with the hand on the iPod, and they were just turning like this, just for the pleasure of it. They did not even have any, headphones on. Imagine how much of a crazy experience that is. You can't create this if you have something that is filled with buttons everywhere, like the remote control you have. You have to make space for it, right? However, try to keep in mind, imagine the courage that is necessary to say, okay, we have all the use cases that people maybe value, and we're not going to tackle them because we think this one is more important and deserves the most amazing experience. That's where the waste is coming from at that stage, is when you actually try to do an average job in many directions instead of doing a wonderful job on one particular aspect. So we came up with this checkpoint. We call it the first use case, right? And we're trying to help the teams observe the first use case. So there's 2 dimensions here. First is the concept of first use case, means you're going to rank them and you're going to prioritize one of them. Not 10, not 5, not 3, 1. Super hard. And then to make sure that you have a solid use case, well, the trick is very easy. You just try to fill in this template. The beginning is maybe a bit obvious, like, who is the person? What are they trying to do? Now you go a bit deeper. What do they need? Like, what do they really care about? And then the 2 last lines are the most interesting one is, They want something, but something is in their way, the constraint. And the last one is, and because of this constraint, they have to come up with a workaround. They have to find a way to accomplish what they want to do, despite the constraint. I'll just give you an example. The first time that I joined, not that I joined BlaBlaCar, when I was about to join BlaBlaCar, I actually did a BlaBlaCar trip as a passenger, and on the phone of the driver, when I met her, I could see that there was a post-it on her phone with my name, my phone number, and the meeting point. That post-it was her workaround. The constraint was that our application was way too complicated for her to find the information at the last minute when getting out of the car. That workaround meant that, okay, we have something here. We know there's a problem because she, can actually bother to find every single time she does a trip, she's going to take out her post-it, write down the key information. All right? So that's the concept of the workaround. And so here the waste comes from the lack of prioritization. The last one is around the idea of challenging old patterns. I don't know when was the last time that you actually used a car that was not yours. Either someone rented it to you, or actually you it was one that you rented, sorry. It's likely that you knew how to use the pedals to accelerate and to brake. It's also possible that you had no idea how to use a GPS navigation system. Why? Because this was not following the patterns that you're used to. Picasso famously said, and maybe he stole this actual idea from someone else, good artists copy and great artists steal. At that point, I'm going to get a lot of designers who are going to be very pissed off by what I'm saying right now, because, but what about creativity? The truth is, I think creativity is around assembling old ideas in a new manner for a particular purpose. That, I think, is a wonderfully creative work to do. Then the second pushback I get is, yeah, but what about if the patterns you steal are actually suboptimal? I'm actually stealing shitty patterns, so how good is that? Well, guess what? It might be better than inventing a new one. And for this, I have the killer example. Does anyone know what this is? Keyboard, yes, but more specifically. Pay attention to the letters. They're probably, assembled, organized in a different way than what you're used to, right? Sorry? Yes, it's a type of keyboard that is called the Dvorak, and it allows you, basically, you can see that the vowels are on one side and a lot of consonants on the other. Basically allows you to type faster, to make less mistakes, because you're able to move your fingers less. It's a better keyboard than the keyboard you have. So that's great, right? Soon all our computers will have this Dvorak keyboard. The only problem is that Dvorak was invented in 1936. How come a company like Apple is using the QWERTY pattern? The reason why they're using it is just because by the time they had to define their keyboard, it was too late. The QWERTY pattern was already adopted by the population. It was too late. The effort required to have their users change their habit was not worth it, even though it was a suboptimal pattern. Because what you maybe don't know is that QWERTY, from a pattern standpoint, was specifically designed to slow people down. It's actually coming from typewriters, way before computers. The typewriters, if you were typing too fast, you would have the metal bars kind of, clicking to one another and blocking it. So they found a way to slow typewriters down by messing up, the letters. So today, the reason why you're slow at typing is not your fault. It's just, the keyboard is suboptimal. But just take a second to think about it. Apple, since their creation, has never challenged this pattern. even though they're fully aware it's not suboptimal. They know that the cost of changing that is way too high versus just, letting go with it. So next time you're like, oh, but maybe we should reinvent this pattern, just keep this example in mind, because most of the people that tell me, oh, I'm going to reinvent this pattern, I hear a lot of arrogance when I think about this example. Apple did not reinvent the QWERTY pattern. How do we try to help people do a discovery work that avoids this waste of constantly looking for new ways of doing things? We encourage teams to find what we call gold nuggets. Gold nuggets are, interesting patterns that are super useful for the particular effort that you're trying to go through. And basically, what we really tell the teams is that you should not only do a benchmark. Like, I've seen so many teams that do a wonderful benchmark, and then they design their new solution without actually using the benchmark. That makes no sense. Go and steal the things you actually need. The truth is, the creativity part is going to be about what do you go and steal, and how do you assemble them in a way that makes a lot of sense. Crazy hard. Yes, maybe less sexy than coming up with this crazy new interaction that would look amazing on Dribble, but that's how you're going to have an impact. The other thing is, actually, by reusing existing patterns, most of the time you can build them faster. So we went through 3 examples. I didn't go through 4 of the other checks that we do. If you're interested, you can read the book that is available today in French and English. But what I wanted to leave you on is, for those that actually paid attention to those 7 words, they actually make a word, the first letter, because the notion of focus is central to the way you can do discovery. And actually, if I come back to the title of this conference, the one thing that maybe I didn't mention is this one. Product discovery is a waste of time when it's not focused. Thank you.